We already know that GTA 6 is going to be taking place in Leonida, a fictional version of the state of Florida. But based on what we know from the leaks, it seems likely that parts of Georgia will seep into Leonida as well. The biggest piece of evidence for this is a prison in the leaks that looks strikingly similar to the Augusta State Medical Prison. And obviously, I can't show you anything from the leaks, so you'll just have to take my word for it. The mapping project has the prison placed here, which is pretty far south, so it seems like they're going to be incorporating bits of Georgia all throughout the map, and not just in one centralized location. So we already have a pretty good idea of what we might see based on the map being mostly set in a state based on Florida, but I want to take a look at some spots in Georgia that I think would make for some great additions to Leonida. And considering I've lived in Georgia my whole life, this idea is pretty exciting for me. So today I'm going to go through some locations, buildings, and things in Georgia that I think could make its way into the map. And to make this more exciting and keep you on the edge of your seat, I'm going in order based on how likely I think they might end up in the game. So let's get started. Starting at number 11, we have the World of Coke Museum in Atlanta. Or I guess it would be the World of E. Cola Museum if it shows up in the game. For those unfamiliar, the World of Coke Museum is just an advertisement in building form. They have a history exhibit on the company's founding and the creation of Coca-Cola, and they have a fake bottling plant where you can see how the drinks get bottled, but outside of that, they don't have much more to offer. The real draw of it is the giant tasting room where you can try different Coke products from around the world. They have drinks in there that you can't get your hands on in the US. And I don't know if it actually did used to be better or if I just liked it more as a kid, but I can't really recommend going there at this point. Well, I have to butt in here because I found this out when I was editing this video. I was looking for pictures for this, but apparently they shut down the bottling exhibit. Like, that thing just doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. And they've replaced it with icons and then something called Beverage Lab, which I'm actually kind of intrigued by. It sounds like you can kind of create your own soda in this exhibit. I mean, I gotta say, this seems kind of cool. I think, disregard what I said about this not being worth it. I kind of want to go back and see this for myself. Anyway, I think that this could be an interesting building to put in the game, but I think it's incredibly unlikely that it would be anything other than an interesting building. I don't think that this is going to be a building that you can interact with or enter at all, so I only think that this building will show up in the game if there's a substantial city in the northern part of the map that mostly imitates Atlanta. At number 10, we have the Fox Theater in Atlanta. This historic venue has been around since the 1920s and is one of the most unique buildings in the city. It's a massive, beautifully designed theater that's hosted everything from movies to concerts to Broadway productions. But what makes it really interesting is its backstory. The Fox was originally supposed to be this grandiose mosque for a shrine organization before some financial troubles forced them to sell it off and turn it into a movie palace instead. The inside of the theater is absolutely stunning, and if you ever have the chance to just go inside, I would highly recommend it. But even if it isn't a building that we can enter, I think the outside is cool enough to warrant inclusion in the game. But like the World of Coke Museum, I think that this is only likely if Rockstar adds a city at the north of the map based mostly on Atlanta. So we will have to see. Next, at number 9, we have the city of Augusta. Considering that we already know that the state prison is based off of the one in Augusta, it doesn't seem like that far of a stretch to think that Augusta might show up in the game in some capacity. But I have it this low on the list for good reason. I think that it's possible that they take some inspiration from buildings and the general architectural style of the city, but I think there are better options for replicating entire cities than doing that with Augusta. And I'll get to those cities later in the list. So the short answer here is that I think we could see influences of Augusta in various cities, but it's unlikely that we see specific buildings recreated. I visited the city briefly back in 2019, but I spent most of the day at this amphitheater, so I don't really have a good feel of the city personally. But looking around at the city on Street View is pretty fun. At number 8, I have the city of Macon. Sitting basically right in the middle of the state, I think that it serves as a pretty good halfway point between Florida and Atlanta. So if any bits of Atlanta show up at the top of the map, I think it's pretty likely that we'll see elements of Macon in the game too. Macon has this feel of being a big city without you feeling claustrophobic. Maybe the best way to describe it is that it feels like a downtown area of a city, but that's just the whole city. The city also sits on terrain that is pretty hilly, so you can put yourself almost anywhere on Street View and get a spot where you can be looking up either way you look. And then there are just some really cool buildings in the city. If Rockstar wants to add variety in the land, Macon could provide that with a city that serves as a transition point from the super flat Florida to the more extreme hills and mountains in North Georgia. Now, do I think that we'll see a replica of Macon in the game? No, not at all. But Macon could serve as inspiration for what a transition city could look like. If anything, there are plenty of buildings for them to recreate or just take inspiration from. At number 7, we have Stone Mountain. Located to the east of Atlanta, this giant granite boulder sticks out in the horizon for miles and has a lot of history to it. It was used as the meeting point for the Ku Klux Klan's reformation in 1915, and it also has a giant Confederate monument etched into its face, which was completed in 1972 after over 50 years of work. Stone Mountain is also surrounded by a park that serves as this very small-scale theme park. They've got mini golf, they've got a railroad, and yes, they even have Dinotorium. Now, I feel like it's pretty likely that a structure like Stone Mountain might end up in the game since it's such an interesting landmark and can be seen from all around, but I think if it's in the game, it will only be the stone structure, no theme park. Because let's be realistic, there's a much more recognizable theme park in Florida that they can get inspiration from. But I think the history of Stone Mountain is something that would intrigue Rockstar the most. We already had the KKK in Red Dead Redemption 2, so maybe they make another appearance if you go to the top of Stone Mountain in the game. It would probably be pretty fun to knock them off the side of it. And then I can't even imagine who they would replace the Confederates with on the monument. Overall, I think that there are a lot of good reasons to include this in the game, but I don't know if it's very likely. At number 6, we have Providence Canyon State Park. Commonly referred to as the Little Grand Canyon, this geographic anomaly is the result of poor farming practices by people who settled the area in the 19th century. On top of this just being a cool looking place, I think it could fit well on the map considering they could place it just about anywhere that's inland since it's a geographic structure that goes down and not up. Meaning it wouldn't look that out of place in Florida's mostly flat terrain. I think it would be a fun area to explore in the game, and it could serve as a place for Rockstar to hide collectibles or other Easter eggs. And on top of all of that, you have these 2 lakes nearby which are already named something that could be in a GTA game. I mean, Rockstar wouldn't even have to change the names. At number 5, we have Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Located just south of Atlanta, this is the world's busiest airport, at least according to Wikipedia's data from 2023. So with that being said, it would make sense for some inspiration to be drawn from this airport if they're wanting to place one at the top of the map, which I think they'll do. We've never been able to go inside of an airport, so yeah, actually this is incorrect. You can enter the airport in Vice City, the Escobar International Airport. It has an interior. You can go into it, so I don't know what I was saying. It was completely incorrect. Okay, back to the video. So I don't know how much of this they would want to replicate, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if this was the airport they used for inspiration for a secondary airport. At number 4, we have the Georgia Guidestones. For those unfamiliar, these stones were erected anonymously in 1980. Inscribed on these giant stones include instructions on how to rebuild society after a complete and total collapse. They were blown up in 2022 and haven't been rebuilt. These stones were subject to a lot of conspiracy theories and just became something so odd and unique that you had to go and see it. And lucky for me, I did go and see it just 2 years before they were blown up. I can't really say I was blown away by it, but they were just kind of interesting. The fact that someone had it made in the first place and they did it anonymously was fascinating enough. Anyway, I think this is right up Rockstar's alley. They love putting weird stuff like this in their maps for people to find. I don't think they're going to do a one-to-one recreation of the Guidestones, but they'll probably do something similar. I'm guessing there's going to be a puzzle you have to solve with it, and maybe you get a unique collectible in the end or something. At number 3, it's actually a thing rather than a place, and that thing would be the historical markers that can be found at sites of historic events and buildings throughout the state of Georgia. And this is actually something that Florida has also, which is why I've put it up so high on this list. These markers label what the historic site is and gives a short summary of it, and I just think that this is a great opportunity for Rockstar to put in some extra detail and humor for players who go out exploring. Maybe it could be something that contributes to your 100% game completion, or maybe you have to find 10 of them to complete the goal or something. And even if it isn't something that's required for 100%ing the game, it would still be a cool way to add more character and depth to the world. And coming in at number 2, we have something a little more abstract. Small rural towns. I don't think there's much point in pointing to one specific town, but I think there are a lot of towns out in the middle of nowhere that Rockstar can take inspiration from. If the map is as large as we think it is, there's going to be a lot of distance in between the larger cities. This space could be filled with these smaller towns scattered throughout, and this scene from the first trailer kind of makes me think that it's taking place in a small rural town in the middle of the map. I think that RDR2 did a great job of making the map feel large while still making it feel alive with these houses and smaller settlements spread throughout, even when you're traveling between cities. I think it's likely that Rockstar will carry some of that over to GTA 6, especially now that it seems like the popular sentiment seems to be hating on GTA 5's emptiness outside of Los Santos. And finally, at number 1 we have the city of Savannah. If there's any city from Georgia that's going to get a one-to-one replica in the game, it seems like Savannah is the perfect choice. Savannah has a ton of history to it, and the overall look and feel of the city is so cool and just full of character. I visited Savannah a couple of years ago and had a great time just walking around and taking in the sights. There are so many cool and awesome historical buildings that I enjoy just looking at. Now, I haven't been to New Orleans, but Savannah does remind me a lot of New Orleans. And since RDR2 included Saint Denis, a city primarily based on New Orleans, it seems like Rockstar would already have a good idea on how to replicate Savannah. I mean, just look at the street and tell me it doesn't remind you of Saint Denis. I dare you. Do it. But while I have Savannah at the number 1 spot, I also have 4 things specifically from Savannah that I think might be in the game. And even though I think that all 4 of these are likely to make it into the game if Savannah is present, I've ranked these Savannah things from least likely to be in the game to most likely to be in the game as well. Coming in at number 4, we have Bonaventure Cemetery. This cemetery has been around since 1846 and is most notable for being the burial site of songwriter Johnny Mercer. This cemetery is also populated by these massive oak trees with Spanish moss dangling down over you. This is kind of a staple of Savannah as a whole, but it feels the most at home at this cemetery for some reason. Maybe it's because these trees have been alive longer than some of the people buried under them, but it's really just a beautiful cemetery, and it's also another part of Savannah that reminds me of Saint Denis, which is also one of the reasons why it's at the bottom of this list. It's certainly larger in scale than the cemetery in Saint Denis, but there's only so much space on the map and it just might not make the cut. But if it is in the game, it'll be a cool place to explore and see who Rockstar has buried in it. Maybe some characters from Vice City will have a tombstone with their name on it. Next, at number 3, we have the Savannah Bus Tours, or Trolley Tours. These are pretty common in hot vacation destinations that have a lot of history, so a tour bus isn't anything unique to Savannah, but I think adding something like this into the game would be fun and be another way for Rockstar to add depth and detail to the city's in-game history. Los Santos has the Vinewood tour bus they can get on, so it's not like this idea is out of the question for making a return in GTA 6. It's also likely that this is something that would be available in Vice City, which I'm all for as well. At number 2, we have the squares. When the city of Savannah was originally being laid out by the first settlers, they designed the city around 4 squares that would be set aside to be turned into green spaces. The first original squares contained some sort of monument except for Telfair Square, which is just an open green space. These aren't anything terribly incredible, but they're a pretty iconic part of Savannah's look and design, so it just makes sense to include them here. There are 22 squares in the city today, which is probably way more than Rockstar would care to include, but I think making replicas of at least the original 4 would be cool. And finally, at number 1, we have River Street. I would argue that this street is just as iconic and cool as Ocean Drive is in Miami. I think that River Street is a must-have if Rockstar is even considering basing a city off of Savannah. River Street runs along the river, who would have guessed, and is home to a bunch of restaurants and shops. The bottom line is that this is just a cool place to be at, and if you're doubting me, then you need to take a trip to Savannah and simply walk down the street and then come back to this video and let me know how wrong you are. Promenades will likely be in Vice City since they are in Miami, so if Savannah is in the game, then I think River Street representation is a must. I mean, just imagine walking down this at sunset. And I don't have to imagine it because I did that in real life, but I would love to do it again in GTA 6, so Rockstar, please make it happen and put River Street in the game. Please. Well, that's my list. Let me know what you think, and let me know in the comments what places or things from Georgia you would want to see in the game. Let me know if you agree with this list, and also if I left something out that you think should be in the list, let me know in the comments. And if you want to see more evidence for parts of Georgia being included in GTA 6, I would highly recommend watching this video by Sako505. I'll put a link in the description. And sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Okay, bye.